Good morning, Sec 2s. This is Mr. Seow, and today I'm teaching a lesson on reliability. So you should have this worksheet with you, or have a post-it with you, have your writing materials, and at any point in this video, you can speed up, slow down, or pause in order to better suit your learning speed. Today's lesson on reliability is about whether or not we can trust or not trust a source. Okay, can we highlight this? Whether or not we trust a source has to do with what the source says or tells us. And we have to check what it tells us based on a cross-reference. So it's checking what the source says. A cross-reference is about checking what a source says, and we check it against contextual knowledge, or what we know, or against another source. This is very vague at the moment, so I'm going to use an example to help you visualize what it means to cross-refer what the source says to our own knowledge and to another source. So at this point, pause if you need to write down your notes and highlight. And then I can move on. And so let's take a look. Please get a post-it, and we will write the message of the source coming up. Source A, extracted from a lesson for 2H3 by Mr. Seow. That's the provenance. And the source says, okay, for history end of year exam, we will test you up to chapter 5, defeat of Nazi Germany in World War II. Make sure to revise everything from World War I, Stalin, Hitler, and World War II. Source-based questions will be purpose, surprise, reliability, and evaluation. Pause. Write down what you think the message of this source is. When you're done, I move on. What does the source tell you? So remember, the message is when I don't give you a focus. In this case, the previous source and this question has no focus. You are finding the message. Sometimes I can give you a focus, and that would be an inference. You would have to make an inference based on the focus I give you. So the previous source had the message that the EOY will test many topics on world history. And so the student should be prepared. Or language should be bad now, sorry. Test many topics on world history and students are to be prepared. And this is evident from the source that said, we will test you up to chapter 5, defeat of Nazi Germany. At this point, all your alarm bells should be ringing. You should be thinking to yourself, this is very suspicious. Because why? Why is it suspicious? Because you've never heard Nazi Germany until this lesson, right? So how can it be that it's going to come out in end of year? So how do I double check what Mr. Seow has told the class? And yes, you might recall what we said in the worksheet already. We can double check using this technique called a cross-reference. So let's take a look. First thing I know that lower secondary, Sec 1 and 2 history, is all about Singapore. So, in fact, I shouldn't care about how Nazi Germany, defeated France in 1940, Battle of Britain, Operation Barbarossa in 1941, invade Russia, gets defeated at Stalingrad, the Second Front opens at Normandy, D-Day, Americans come in. All this is not in lower sec history, right? There's no defeat of Germany. Or some of you might go to the staff room in a great panic and say, Mr. Ricky, Mr. Seow said defeat of Germany is being tested. What's going on? And Mr. Ricky might say, oh no, Sec 2 has no world history. Actually, Mr. Seow was talking about the topics for Sec 3 end of year. So 1 and 2 are both what we would call a cross-reference. We are cross-referencing this message, the message from source A, that EOY has many topics in world history, against what? Against our contextual knowledge and against another source. Either one of these methods would help you check reliability of source A. Either one. Don't have to do both. So, if I find out that source A says EOY would test topics in world history, but I myself know that there is no defeat of Germany, there is no world history in lower secondary, my contextual knowledge, right, contradicts the message of source A. Let me repeat that. My contextual knowledge contradicts the message of source A. Because what source A says is contradicted, or another word for this is challenge, is contradicted and challenged by my contextual knowledge that I've provided here. So what source A says is false, which means that source A is not reliable, cannot be trusted, cannot be believed. It's not credible as evidence. Let's look at the second example. Source A says EOY has topics tested in world history. Because you asked Mr. Ricky, who is a teacher and quite trustworthy, and he said, oh, Mr. Seow got it wrong. Actually, this is Sec 3, not Sec 2. Now you know source A is not reliable, again, about the topics tested, because it is contradicted, challenged by another reliable source, Mr. Ricky. And that's how we know whether or not source A is reliable. Two methods. Cross-reference to contextual knowledge, cross-reference to another reliable source. So, we typically will ask questions like, can you trust source A? Is source B reliable? Notice that these two questions here have no focus. So you push out a message. Well, source A's message is I cross-refer source A's message to another source. I cross-refer source B's message to my contextual knowledge. If it is supported, it's reliable. If the message is contradicted, it's not reliable. Do you believe source C about focus? Is source D credible as evidence about focus? These two question types now, they have a focus, so you push out an inference. I believe source C, which tells me about this focus, I believe source C because it is supported by my contextual knowledge. Source D is not credible as evidence about this focus in saying that Source D is not credible because it is contradicted. Okay. Contradicted by my contextual knowledge. And summarize the lesson. so far. To answer the reliability question, get the inference or message out, and then check it against your contextual knowledge or another source, and this is what we call the cross-reference. Okay. So now let's look at the practice on the worksheet, which is about the racial riots. We come back here now to the worksheet. So we must first identify and explain the message or the source, or message or inference. So this one depends on whether or not a focus was given to you. And then we do a cross-reference. If supported, then it's reliable. And if contradicted, then it's unreliable. Right? And this one would be the focus. So let's look at the reliable and unreliable. Reliable, the source can be trusted. It's supported by my contextual knowledge. It is, what do you think? Supported by an unreliable source. Unreliable is the opposite, of course. The source's message is contradicted by my contextual knowledge. Can I leave you to fill in the next one by yourself? This blank, what should it be? Finally, the steps to answering a reliability question. Identify and explain the message or inference of a source, and check it against your contextual knowledge or another source. Right. Okay. Let's look at this. Who was responsible for the 1964 race riots? So this is a statement by the PAP on the Straits Times. And notice that the source is telling you, read the source. The source is effectively saying that UMNO has accused the PAP of being unfair to the Malays. So I get the message out. Message is that UMNO's allegations about the PAP. In this case, I've provided a message for you in this worksheet. Right? The message is that UMNO is responsible for the racial riots because they claim Singapore's government is treating the Malay people badly. Because of this claim, the Malay people get angry. Because they get angry, the tensions are high. Because tensions are high, people start fighting and it leads to riots. So that's the logic behind this source. First method is cross-reference to contextual knowledge. So can we all please write this down? And I will be going a bit faster now. And you have to pause and slow down if you need to. So first of all, we look at this message. We think about what we know. Okay. We know that, this is my contextual knowledge, we know that UMNO leaders indeed came down to Singapore to make inflammatory speeches. Even better, if you can flex on me, you know who the leaders are. Such as this guy called Syed Jaafar. Right? Came down to Singapore, made inflammatory speeches that made some Malay people upset and angry, and raised the racial tensions in Singapore. Oh, this is my contextual knowledge. Because of this contextual knowledge, I realized that what the source says about UMNO's allegations is quite true. It's supported by my contextual knowledge. So, okay, so this is a support. And because it is supported by my contextual knowledge, it means that, do I trust the statement? This is the question. Do I trust the statement? Yes, I trust the statement. So notice that what I've done so far, let's figure out the steps. I figured out the message of source A. Then I went to think about my contextual knowledge. Please note that historians usually call this CK. So if you hear CK from me from now on, it means contextual knowledge. Contextual knowledge means what you know from your historical learning about this particular period or event. And then figure out if CK supports or contradicts. Message contradicts source A, which tells me whether I trust or do not trust source A. And finally, check my stand in the ATQ. So now that I've figured out the CK, figured out support, figured out trust, I go into ATQ, I trust the statement. At this point, please pause the video and take down the notes you need to take down. It's tricky because the steps are jumbled up. I had to figure out what's the message, go and put in my contextual knowledge, find out that my contextual knowledge supports the message, then decide what is my stand, which is the trust. It's almost like your answer, right? In your head, the thinking is steps 2, 4, 3, 1. Can you see? 2, 4, 3, 1. But in fact, when you write out the answer, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. The thinking and the writing order is different. And if I were to look at this question, the writing order makes the most sense. Let's take a look at it. Read it for yourself. Can you trust this statement? Explain your answer. My answer now is, I can trust this statement because it tells me that UMNO was responsible for the racial riots because of the allegations about Singapore's government treating the Malay people badly. This is evident from the source, evident from source A, which states that the PAP was being unfair to the Malays. People and newspapers with UMNO are accusing the PAP. I trust the statement about what it says about UMNO being responsible because this is supported by my contextual knowledge. Based on my contextual knowledge, UMNO leaders like Syed Jaafar indeed came down to Singapore to make these inflammatory speeches that made some Malay people upset and angry, raised the racial tensions, which eventually led to the riots. This whole answer is a very tight and coherent reliability answer. Okay, this answer would be L for 6 marks. it's important for you to realize that this tight and coherent answer doesn't just flow from your brain in this order. The order in which you think about the answer is in fact, what's the message? What's my CK? Does it support or contradict? And therefore, do I trust or not trust? Digest that. Pause. Digest. And let me move on. So, if method 1 was cross-referenced to CK, method 2 would be cross-referenced to another source. And now I need to think about what the other sources are saying. Please note that method 2 is restricted to reliable sources because you don't want to check whether or not source A is trustworthy by using another source that is not reliable. How to say? For example, the example about the topics being tested in end of year. Why did you go to Mr. Ricky to ask? Why didn't you ask your classmates? Because your classmates also don't know. You ask your classmates is not going to be very helpful. They also not sure. You should ask someone who confirm know and will tell you the truth. Similarly for history cross-reference, ask a source that knows the truth. Ask a source that will tell you the truth. So let's look at, to cross-reference to another reliable source, we need to read another source. Let's look at this source. This source is Prime Minister of Malaysia, Tunku Abdul Rahman. Yep. Okay, so Tunku Abdul Rahman, pause and read. He says that Indonesia is the responsible one. It is ridiculous to say that UMNO is responsible. Okay, so source B clearly contradicts source A. Clearly, this source would say that source A is telling lies. But source B is not reliable. Tunku Abdul Rahman is the leader of UMNO. Of course, he would say it's not UMNO. Why would he come and confess that UMNO is the one that did it? So we don't want to use source B yet. Is there another source we can use? Okay, maybe we can use source C. Source C is a letter. Anyway, source C confirmed better than source B, right? Because source B is untrustworthy, as I know that the leader of UMNO is definitely going to protect UMNO. So source C, Syed Jaafar, made a disgraceful and inflammatory speech. So here, the tricky part is I need to know that Syed Jaafar is part of UMNO. And thanks to source C, I have my cross-reference, right? Source C says, is UMNO responsible? Yes. His speech was bound to stir up trouble, and it did. Okay. So again, we are going to use source C now. And source C states that Syed Jaafar made a disgraceful and inflammatory speech, right? His speech was bound to stir up trouble, and in fact it did. From this evidence, I can draw out the inference. I can't just dump the evidence. I need to draw out the inference. Source C tells me that UMNO was responsible for the racial riots because its leaders stirred up negative racial tensions in Singapore through their political interventions. Notice that I have chop, use the evidence to push out an inference. Chop. And so now this one is what? Responsible is support. If support means trust. And therefore, my first stand must be trust. Please take a couple minutes, digest what we just did. We just went to, the steps here are very similar. We actually figured out the message of source A, right? But this time we didn't think about contextual knowledge. This time we went to find another trustworthy, reliable source that also talks about whether UMNO is responsible, which is the message of source A. And now we need to figure out whether other source supports or contradicts message of source A. And therefore we do our stand. This is the steps for method 2, cross-reference to another reliable source. Pause and take your notes where necessary. And then since we're here already, I'll just summarize what you need to do for source B. For source B, very bad, right? We already prejudge by looking at the provenance. Look at it. Tengku, leader of UMNO, talk about UMNO not responsible. I don't trust you. But we still must do our cross-reference, do our due diligence, do our checking. So this one, I leave it to you to choose. You can do method 1, cross-reference to contextual knowledge, or you can do method 2, cross-reference to another reliable source. And this time, can I suggest that your other reliable source, you don't pick source A? Why? Because source A is by who? By the PAP. Source A itself might have an agenda or a bias, right? And we are talking about choosing a trustworthy source, another trustworthy source. So can I suggest that if you were to do method 2, you will use source C? Can? Okay. So again, the steps: push out the message, figure out your contextual knowledge or the other source, evidence, and inference. Then see whether it support or contradict, and decide on your stand. Once you're done with this question, practice writing out the paragraph on foolscap. Because seeing it in this tabular form, where I provide with you all the helping hints and scaffolds and keywords, with all these keywords, you just fill in the blank, right? It's a different situation from if you were to see this question and write the paragraph on your own. So I suggest, for those of you who want to master this skill, look at the source in your worksheet, look at the question, copy the question onto your worksheet, and try it without this scaffold. See if you can hit all the points. And finally, once you're done with that, you can look at source C. Notice that source C, I've done something different. I've added in a question focus. So source C actually is no longer asking you for checking reliability of a message. It's now asking you for checking reliability of an inference. Okay? So to help you out, I'm going to do it quickly and show you how I would think. I would think like that. Source C is, when you decide credible or not credible as evidence about UMNO's responsibility in causing the racial riots. Because source C tells me that UMNO was responsible for causing the racial riots, as their leaders came to Singapore and made political interventions that stirred cause resulted in greater racial tensions. This is evident from this is how I think. Okay. Source C is don't know yet, credible or not credible, as evidence about UMNO's responsibility. UMNO being responsible for the riots because it is which tells me that UMNO leaders did in fact come down to make in this case you are stuck. I'm stuck because our contextual knowledge is very similar to the source. How does the examiner know that you are not just copying from the source? It means that you must come up with knowledge outside of the source to support the source. Means I cannot just talk about Syed Jafar and his speeches really. So what else can I say? It in fact come down to contest the elections here and try to capture the Malay votes by arguing that the government was mistreating them, which would have caused unhappiness between the races in Singapore. So now look at the trick. I have used a different contextual knowledge. I've used the fact that UMNO came to contest the 1963 elections and talk about mistreating them in 1963. I used a different contextual knowledge from the previous one I used about Syed Jafar, so I don't repeat the source, and so I can show the examiner I know something else. And now I can fill in already. I can fill in the rest. This is a support, clearly. And so supported means that it is credible. And so source C is credible. So where are my marks? My marks are here. It's L23. Wrong. This is L22. This is L23. And this is L36. The cross-reference is very, very important. It brings you from barely pass to full marks. That is what we need for reliability question. Okay, I have to summarize. I've given you a lesson today on reliability. Can we trust the source? And I've given you two methods to do so. One method is by checking the contextual knowledge, and the other method is by checking to another reliable source. So please, at home, fill in this worksheet, practice writing, and if you want to check in your success criteria, the last page will have a rubric that would tell you about the inference, evidence, and cross-reference. You can ignore the third row. So these are the rows you want to look at. You can ignore the third row and you can ignore the fifth row because this is all taught in upper sec. So now You just look at content, message inference, evidence, and cross-reference. Okay, thank you Sec 2, and have a good September break.